Hello, and welcome to the BYU Family History Library webinar series. We're glad you could join us today. I'm Anna Allred, and I'll be your host for this webinar. If you have technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You are welcome to use the chat box during the webinar for comments, insights, and questions. However, all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our next webinar will be on September 15th, Exploring the Basics of My Heritage with James Tanner. If you would like to access a previous webinar, please visit our webinar index on our website or search on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are recorded and uploaded by the following Monday for your convenience. We also post links to recordings and other updates on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. For today's webinar, we are pleased to hear from James Baker, who will be giving a presentation on Why Didn't We Match? Mr. Baker has been an active genealogist for the past 15 years. In 2011, he completed the Board for Certification of Genealogists requirements to become a board-certified genealogist with a specialty in German genealogy research. He also specializes in Midwest U.S., early American research, and DNA. He was an officer of the Sacramento German Genealogy Society and contributed numerous articles to its quarterly publication, Der Blumenbaum. He also wrote articles for the National Genealogical Society magazine and the NGS Quarterly. He volunteered for over 10 years at the Sacramento Regional Family History Library. He has presented a total of 9 webinars for Legacy Family Tree and for the Southern California Genealogy Jamboree communities. Beginning in 2012, he has given over 400 presentations to over 50 genealogy societies at local, regional, and national genealogy events. Mr. Baker earned a PhD in sociology and social psychology from the University of Utah. He is retired from an aerospace and business management career. In his work career, he consulted for many large companies, including Boeing, General Electric, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon. He has been an adjunct professor of sociology at UCLA and USC. His most fun job was being the piano man at Shakey's Pizza Parlor. And James, if you are ready, we will turn the time over to you.
Let's see, are we ready? Shall I push a couple of buttons here? And I'll do the share screen button.
Okay, yep.
Let's see, that one doesn't seem to do anything. Why doesn't that do something?
Did you hit share screen?
Let me see. Share screen. This will stop others share. Yeah, that's what we want. And there is, that's the one I want. And now we'll say slideshow from the beginning. There we are. All right, we're in business. Anna, thank you. All right, now we're going to talk about today certain DNA problems that we have. And we run across these questions, it seems like all the time. Like we'll say, I'll talk to some of my 3rd or 4th or 5th cousins that I have maybe found them some way or other, and I think they're my cousins. Some of them match me, some of them don't. Sometimes I'll have a good match with some, but not others, or maybe they match on ancestry, but not on my heritage, something like that. And so we get into those kinds of problems. Now, I have some examples of what I mean by this and how it can all kind of shake out one way or another. This is my mother's fan chart. There she is in the center, and there's her parents and their parents. If you go over to where the star is on the left, you'll see there is my 1, 2, 3, 4th generation person, Henry Tracy. And I have some people that I know of who match me there and whose paper trail says, yeah, they also descend from Henry, but by a very different route than the way I do it. Similarly, go to the left, and there's some people who match me even out further. So those are the ones that I want to talk about. This might make it easier to look at because here I am on the left-hand side of this, of the three of us. And so here I am, and I go up 5 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to a Jonathan Tracy. Jim F. also goes there. And so that's why actually we connect one place down at Henry. So we are third cousins, and he's a little younger than I am. So he's a third cousin once removed. I have on the right side, there's a guy named Sean Tracy. I think that I match him, but if you go 5 generations up, here's my Jonathan Tracy. He has a brother, Henry Tracy. You see, that's where Sean's going. And so we would connect even one step further. He would be my 5th cousin. And now the question is, are we going to match one another? Now, I kind of know these people because we're all kind of researcher pals. And so we're trying to work on data for the 5th and 6th generation Tracys. So now the question is, on DNA, will we match one another? And so we're going to check that. Now, a reminder, it's the scores that are going to tell us about what kind of relationship we have. So that if you get a score like about 200, 222, that's probably like a second cousin. And then if it's a second cousin once removed, you divide by 2. And then a third cousin, and then of course, as it goes on down, now I've marked in red, that's where I should get a score with Jim F of about 28. That's where a third cousin once removed would match. Now, if I go way down a little further with Sean, he's a 5th cousin. He's not going to get a very high score at all. On average, by the time you're at the 5th cousin level, you don't even score high enough to make the cutoff. So that's where we are. Now, let's take a look at what really happened. Here's some results. And so here's my first guy, Jim F. If he scores about 28, he'd be average. He actually scored 24. He's right there in that ballpark. He's got a brother who scored a little higher, a sister who scored with me a little less, but that family of 3 siblings, they're scoring about where they ought to. And that's the beauty of the scores, that they can pretty well tell you, where they are in terms of your relationship. Now, looking at Sean, he's the guy who would be a 5th cousin. So he would not score, maybe on average, only about 3.5. And indeed, he's not on the list. He is not considered a match. And that means Ancestry did not find him. So he's one of those many people who score less than the cutoff, which is 8. Now, that third bullet, this is where it gets kind of interesting, because on average, Sean and Jim F., they wouldn't match, but they actually did. They had a score of 25. They really matched very well. And you say, wow, why is that? How do you explain it? Well, the answer really is there is a certain amount of variation in those centimorgan scores. And they're all in kind of the same range. If they're in that same range, we can understand that. But then how do we get one like those 2 guys who they really scored big, but yet Sean didn't even make the cut with me? So is he Jim's relative, but not my relative? Well, I've got an easy answer. Yeah, he's really my relative, but sometimes the results kind of get very different than what you would expect. The shared matches are something that are really going to help us and tell us who matches who, because they just are. And so here we have all these shared matches with, I have a lot of them with Jim F. and his siblings. They were the right kind of my known Tracy people. So it's kind of another vote that we got the paper trail tree right. Now, those two guys, they not only matched, but they had 6 shared matches, and they're mostly, those people are coming from the same branch of the tree where Jim F. was. But again, that suggests, yes, they're a solid match. I want to talk about collaboration with other people in the world of DNA, because I have found it really useful to be able to access the data for just a few key match people that represent different branches of the family. And sometimes, oftentimes, you're good matches. You just tell them what you want to do. It's not going to interfere with their data. And so they'll just push a couple of buttons on the machine and you can have access to their information. So in this case, because here I had not only my own match data, but now I also have Jim F. kind of set me up. We push the buttons and we can look at one another's materials. So third bullet, because I had access to that data, I found it kind of useful to know that Sean had shown up for as a good match for him, and also who their shared matches were. So with collaboration, you can do a few extra things. I want to be sure you know how to do this. So here on where the star is in the upper left, if you go to the screen that says your DNA results summary, that's where you're going to find what you want. So you go there, and then in the upper right, where it says settings, that's where you're going to push the buttons and make it so that you can have access to another person's, you can share data with them. And so, see, this is where once you go to the settings and then you go sharing preferences among them, so you see where the top arrow is, that's where we're looking at our different kind of sharing preferences. And see, Jim F. has now, we've now arranged for each other to be able to see one another's data. So that's the way you do it. And you can have any number of people there. Now, and then in your regular research, your regular analysis that you do from day to day, in that upper left, that's where it says view another test. And so you push that button and take your choice. Now, here is a message that I really want to get across today. And that is, do not restrict yourself to a single DNA site. Like Ancestry's got good material, so do the other sites. Maybe somebody signed up on one of those other sites, but here's the way you do it, the budget saver routine. You got to get in the Ancestry game and they want you to pay. And so you'll try to get it on sale, $59, $69, and you've got it. Then you push a few buttons and you can transfer that raw data. You download, you upload, you do those things, and you can put that data, your data, on MyHeritage, FTDNA, GEDmatch, Living DNA, and it's all for free. So you just saved a couple $100. And that's how you do it. And that's how you should do it, because that will get you on every one of those sites. And between that number of sites, you just might find some people you would not have found otherwise. Now I want to look at the connection between those two other guys, because GEDmatch was the one that really tipped me off on that one. I take a look at GEDmatch for the same matches I'm working on. And it happens that all three of us have loaded our data there. So I look at the other two guys, Jim F. and Sean, and on GEDmatch, again, they have a good solid matching score, 30. And they have a sizable number of shared matches. And so they are absolutely solid. Then I look at the chromosome browser, and I find that on chromosome number 4, not only are they matching, but they're matching on a particular segment of a particular chromosome, and I'm matching them there as well. Now, looking at GEDmatch, here is a happy surprise, because here's Sean, remember my 5th cousin. He and I match. We didn't match on Ancestry. I didn't expect to match, but there we are, and we've got a score of 13. The different companies have different algorithms, and you might get a match on one company, but not another. Even better, the GEDmatch browser shows that Sean and I were matching on the same segment where Sean, all three of us are matching. And so we've got a really great triangulation there. And it means that our relationship, we're all good, solid Tracy people. We're solid citizens. We match just like we should. And also on GEDmatch, 3rd bullet, Sean and I have a lot of shared matches. Part of the reason is that GEDmatch sets the threshold at only 10. Ancestry, more conservative, sets it at 20. So here's what I get when I say on GEDmatch, I say, I want to look at my stuff, the people I'm matching, the people Sean's matching, and the ones we're matching together, and look at all those people. On the right-hand side, I've marked down, we have 80 people that are all matches in common. And that's going to tell me that very probably the absolute great majority of those people are good Tracy people. And so that's going to really help. Now, why did we match on GEDmatch? We didn't match on the others. It's the different algorithms that each company uses to compute their scores. Ancestry is much more conservative. It considers the endogamy factors that they want to discount. And so the Ancestry scores might be significantly lower. It doesn't mean that the other ones are not correct. It's just that Ancestry is really very conservative that way. And 3rd bullet, this might also explain why Sean's was not a match for me on Ancestry. Let's look at MyHeritage, which is another one of the really good, the good companies. I have about 10,000 matches there. I have like 27,000. I've got 3 times as many on Ancestry. But hey, if I'm getting 10,000 more people, it's worth a look. So I'm going to look now to see, could those other people, Sean and Jim F., maybe they're on MyHeritage. So let's look. And it turns out, yes, they are. We've already learned from looking at GEDmatch that chromosome 4, there's a segment there that is kind of like, that's the Tracy chromosome. And once again, on MyHeritage, I'm getting the same information. And on this time, he scores on MyHeritage 14.3. On GEDmatch, he was almost the same. The last time we talked about segment analysis. And so here's just an example of that, of looking now at all those different people who score. Sean Tracy is near the top. He's got a score of 14.3, and he's going to overlap with a lot of all those other people on chromosome number 4, who very likely are also Tracy people, because they're connected with me, they're connected with Sean, and we're all matching there. And then down there, down the way, you see here is Jim Fetter, my other cousin, and see, he's part of that chromosome 4 group as well. So on MyHeritage, they allow you to do this special thing that you cannot do on Ancestry. So I'm going to look at who I'm matching and who Sean is matching, and like what kind of matches do we have in common. So you see at the top, I'm clicking on his page on MyHeritage. And so that brings up all this new information. And so the second arrow down, it says we have 100 matches in common on MyHeritage. And then they start to list them in order of our total amount that we're getting for those people. And number 1, you see there's a person named Ida. Ida scores 34 with me, 35 with Sean. And then we go down from there. His third person is Jim Fetter, our other cousin. So what do we think now about Sean? Well, I kind of think I know why he didn't show up on Ancestry. Ancestry is just eminently conservative in their scoring. He's a 5th cousin. A lot of the 5th cousins don't make the cut, but he has appeared on both MyHeritage and GEDmatch. And so we're good. And the other 2 guys are also good. So we have now accumulated enough data to show that the 3 of us are really solid. And so it was really good to find those people on those 2 different sites. And in fact, second bullet, it's fairly unusual to find that many of our people who go on the different sites. Maybe only 10% of the people post their data on more than one site. You know, I want you to all do that because it is a useful thing. There's another big company, and that's FTDNA. They've been in business longer than any of them, and they are traditionally a little more liberal in their scoring. So if you got a lower score on Ancestry, maybe you'll get a bigger score on FTDNA. However, they make their cutoff a little higher, so maybe you don't find them there after all. Well, I'm looking now on FTDNA, and so here is Jim F. And so we know from chromosome 4, yeah, that's where he's getting a big score of 17. And so that he's looking good on FTDNA, but I did not find a match with Sean on that FTDNA. But once again, those 2 other guys scored, and sometimes you just wonder about those results. Another company is 23andMe, and however, the other guys are not there, so of course their data is not there. And they only include your top 1,500 matches, so they're going to set the cutoff a lot higher, and they're not going to help you as much with your 4th, 5th, 6th cousins. So even if Sean did take the 23andMe test, and maybe he did, we probably would not have had a match there. Living DNA is kind of a new company. Find My Past has bought them, or they created them or something. And so, but they're starting very slowly. And as of a couple months ago, I only have like 200 and some matches. But curiously, Sean is a match for me on Living DNA. You never can tell what you can find on those different sites. So I've talked about all those several different sites. This kind of puts it all together and says where we've got matches and where we don't, but we've got enough matches that I know that the three of us are solid. So what have we learned? Well, in a couple of cases, Sean was not matching me, but he did elsewhere. And then those two other guys, they're just really matching very well. I'm going to give you all an assignment if you would like to accept it. And this says this is an important slide because here are three things that will really help you. First of all, be sure that you've taken the steps to get on all those other DNA sites. I know that you're practically all of you on Ancestry, so all you have to do now is transfer your data to the other sites. It's free. It'll only take you less than an hour to push the buttons and do it, and you might find some things that you didn't expect. Now, here's a second assignment. Join with a few of your key matches on Ancestry so that you have access to their data. You might find some connections with their data that you didn't find with your own data. And then number three assignment, just in case you've not done this yet, be sure to post your tree. You will help other people, and it'll work also the other way. Somebody might find your tree and say, hey, look at that. Not to mention the fact that Ancestry and MyHeritage, those other sites, they can help you more if you post your tree. Now, here is my question. We're going to go out a little further now to say the sixth or seventh cousins. It's a similar question that we had with Sean, and that's, why do sometimes we get a match for that distant cousin? Second bullet there is kind of an answer. On average, those distant cousins will score too low. They won't make the cut, but yet we have learned that about 10 to 15% of our matches may score considerably higher than expected. I'm going to give you an example of a seventh cousin in just a moment. The big DNA guys, they say that on average, now, see, it's not every time, but it's on average, every time you go from one generation to the next, you go from the third generation to the fourth, or, things like that. Every time you add one more new person to the mix, the scores are diluted by about half. So if I score 888 with my first cousin, the first cousin has a child, but that child is getting half of his DNA from my cousin's wife. And so on average, that person then will only score about half as much as my cousin. That's on average, but for a specific family, it doesn't always work that way. Now, I kind of went through and looked at a number of different mother-child, father-child, parent-child combos, and I am finding more randomness than I am, the textbook kind of 50% rule. And so, in other words, anything can happen when you go from one generation to the next, but it's nothing like a normal curve. It's just sort of kind of a random thing, but oftentimes you just don't get much change from the parent to the child. Now, I showed you this screen a few moments ago, this screenshot. This was for my fifth cousin, Sean Tracy, and the people that he has big matches with. One of them is this person named Ida, who is a match I've seen before. Good old Ida has been on Ancestry, My Heritage. She's on the other sites. I found her first on Ancestry, where she scored with me 32. That's a good score. And we had a big bunch of shared matches. As I look at her matches, I can tell that they are representing early Tracies, people that, according to their posted trees and according to their scores, they're like fourth and fifth and sixth cousins. Not many, only 4 people among my first, second, and third cousins match Ida. She's matching those people that are further out. And so, but of course, she's an example of a match that scores much higher than we expect. And here we found her with Sean Tracy. Well, Ida, I'm showing you her tree and my tree. See, I'm going up there to different Tracys. This is my mother's side of the house. And eventually I get to a Christopher Tracy, and Christopher has a brother named Jonathan that is Ida's person there. And then we both descend from a Christopher Tracy Sr. So it takes me 8 steps to get back to that Christopher Tracy. It takes Ida 8 steps as well. So that makes her my 7th cousin. A 7th cousin is just not expected, not supposed to score 32 or 34, but she did. And indeed, some of them do. A few of them, for some odd reason, they just continue to get a good quotient of DNA from some of those faraway people. Now, I hit the button that says, let me look at Ida's matches. And on My Heritage, she's got a big bunch of them, 93 of them. And so here are some of them that I recognize some of these people, because either they have matched other people that I know or they posted their trees. These are all good Tracy people. So who did she match? Well, just a minute ago, I told you she's not matching my first and second cousins, but rather these more distant people. And it turns out that it is because she comes from a group up there in Maine, New England, and her people hardly ever left Maine. And so, and it's similar with a lot of those other people that she has matches with. So a lot of those people are not matching a lot of my other people, but they are matching Ida. So now remember Jim Fetter, my third cousin. I say, how about Ida? They did not match. And I don't know why, but it's the luck of the draw sometimes. I had numerous matches with Ida's people, but Jim did not. Why did that happen? And here we're back to the randomness. And it's just like going to the dice table, because there is a lot of randomness with our DNA scores. So is randomness playing a big part? Yes, it is. The DNA results are a mixture of the kind of scores that you expect, because you expect certain scores at a certain level of relationship, but also this other randomness thing comes in, and we are thankful for that, because when we get down to finding 4th, 5th, and 6th cousins, we expect a certain degree of randomness, and that's where we expect and hope that we will find some people who score much higher than we would ever expect them to. So again, I want to underscore this point. I don't want to beat it into the ground, but I want to say that if you go to different DNA sites and you look at what different people who match you have, you collaborate with those people, you might find some more people. Well, with those fifth, sixth, seventh cousins, we will expect a certain amount of randomness. I took this one off of Bettinger. Blaine Bettinger is one of the big guys in genetic DNA, and he conducted really a sizable, important study where he got a lot of people to contribute their information, what they had found, of what kind of scores do different kind of relationship people get. And so there he has marked down how many in all these categories. I want to direct your attention to the right-hand column where he lists sixth cousins one time removed, seventh cousins, down at the bottom, eighth cousins. Now, sometimes we almost hear words like, oh, you can't find an eighth or a seventh cousin. You do well to find a third or a fourth cousin. Not necessarily. See, I have found them, Bettinger has found them, and you can find them. And this is where, see, he shows that on average, what you find in real life is a little different than what you would expect if you just go by the textbook arrangement and say a sixth cousin will not make the cutoff because the score will be too low. See, he's found a bunch of people who did score very well as sixth cousins. All right, now, different DNA sites, different scores, sometimes it makes a difference. And so sometimes there are major disparities from one to the other. And so then you say, which one is the real one? And so here is an example that I've picked off a few people that I have who are matches who score different on the different tests. And notice that for the FTDNA group, they're scoring higher there. And on Ancestry on the right, generally lower. But by and large, the scores are mostly in the same general range. So usually it doesn't make that much difference, except once in a while, you run across a few and you say, wait a minute, this just what's going on here? And so like here are about 6 people who had what looked like really solid scores on GEDmatch, but they're not scoring that way on Ancestry. So you say, which score is right? And so when the scores are that far apart, you've got to say, I've got to do a little bit more analysis. And to do that analysis, third bullet, the answer is you use shared matches. And so if they've got a bunch of shared matches with other people and you know about those people, then that tells the story. So here we are on GEDmatch. And so I'm looking at this person. I've drawn the arrow down there to S Zobeli. And so see, she scores 30, she scores 43. Her largest segment was 33. And so, and then there's one down the way, Bobby Toy, who scores 41. Those people scored very well on GEDmatch, but not very well on Ancestry. So here are Sobeli's matches on GEDmatch. And as I look at the names, those top 4 people, I recognize their names. They're my second cousins. Sobeli's matching them. She matches me. She's matching all those other good people. She's matching Jim Fetter. And so I know that, you know, she's okay. For some reason, Ancestry has just given her a more conservative score. But on GEDmatch, we've got 90 shared matches. So she's looking very good there. And so because of the shared matches, and third bullet, I contacted her and she told me she's a young person. She doesn't know about her family history, but I think I can put her in there as a solid Tracy person. And especially when I look at her and these other people, the way that they match on upper left, chromosome 17. They're all good Tracy people, and they're all matching one another. That's the value of the browser data that we do not have on Ancestry. So back onto Ancestry with that Sobelai, she just didn't score that much, but she does have some shared matches there, and one of them seems to be with a person who must be her mother, and the mother has a lot of shared matches. Well, why did she score low? In this case, I think Ancestry's algorithm just had it wrong. It just didn't work here because based on her many shared matches, the chromosome browser, she's solid. We have a similar situation with this Bobby Toy, who scores 41 versus 7. Which site is calling it correctly? Once again, on GEDmatch, she has many 190 shared matches. They're Tracy people. But on Ancestry, she did not get a very big score. So to kind of wrap that up, that's kind of what you get sometimes, not often, but you can see there's a way to verify whether or not those people are solid matches by looking at either their shared matches, their chromosome browser, and such. Now, here's a new problem, and that is we have some people who should match us because they are bona fide, absolutely solid relatives, but they do not match us. And so, second bullet, what happens is that sometimes, much like we get a few people who score higher than they should, we will also get a few people who score lower than what they should, like the kind of DNA that they're getting, they're just not getting the same bunch that they need to get to be matches for us, but yet on paper and other ways, yes, they are matches. Ancestry used to have a feature called DNA circles that we really liked, that they traded it in for a feature that they called through lines. We like through lines as well, but there are a couple of things that DNA circles did that it doesn't happen with through lines. And so I'm going to talk about one of those features. This is where Ancestry would say, I have found for you a bunch of people who all seem to descend from one of your ancestors, and this is who they are. So I put an arrow by Keturah Clark, who lived way back when, because Ancestry found, apparently, it looks like, at least 8 or 9 people there, and they have it color-coded, and the golden ones, that says they match you as well as other people in the circle. The blue ones, they match other people in the circle, but they're not matching you. And so now this becomes a question mark, like, should they match you? Are they bona fide relatives or not? Now, for an example, here's my ancestor, Elijah Elifritz. He's one of my great DNA successes. So I've defined 38 descendants of his. They all go up a different route, but they all descend from Elijah. So Ancestry gave me this circle. And so here's my gold people, my blue people. The blue ones match others in the circle, but they don't match me. So look at that one where I've drawn the blue arrow to, go across to the left, you see his name is PME Oliver. So these blue matches, they're the ones I'm interested in because they didn't match me, but it looks like they should have because they're matching all these other people that I match. Third bullet, Ancestry had identified Oliver as a potential match, certainly a potential relative. I could look at his tree, and I did. He shows Elijah in his tree. He's a descendant of Elijah, just like I am. Because Ancestry had found Oliver and his data, I could easily check further on him. I can't do that any longer because the feature is gone. But when I clicked on his shared matches, I found that we had about 19 shared matches, and a bunch of them are really solid Elifritz people. They're all part of that cluster. It is obvious that he is a bona fide person, a relative. He should have scored about 28, but he didn't. He didn't even make the cut. Why didn't we match? It's the reverse of the 10 or 15% of the people who have the high scores. And so here were other examples of randomness, of people who scored. I've been hitting on the people who scored higher than they should. Here's a guy who scored lower than he should, but he still is a solid relative. Now, is this an anomaly or does it happen a fair amount? Well, a little bit of both, because that story continued through other DNA circles. And for whatever reason, we're back to the dice table, these things happen. Just like we get some people who score higher than they should, we get some who score lower than they should, but they turned up in the DNA circles. Now, here I've got a person who has been a challenge. This is Elizabeth Bruce, an ancestor, and it's been hard to find her people because there's no paper records. But with the DNA circles, I could find some of these. Some of these are gold, some are blue. See, the arrow at the top says who are the ones related to me, matches for me. There's 11 people in the circle, but I'm only matching 4 of them. Whereas if I key on this person named Grammy, she's matching everybody in the circle. Now you say, okay, so that's the way it used to be. Why call that to our attention if we cannot use it? Well, you still can use it in effect. The old feature was a great way to do it, but we can go around a little bit of a different way and still find many of those people. How do we do it? We collaborate, because if we can get information like who are some of our other people matching, just like that Grammy matched a bunch of people. I only matched 4 of 11. She matched practically everybody. Now, if you look at our potential matches through the eyes of these other people, we can kind of do that with through lines. See, through lines will tell you who they've got, and but the rule is that they still have to match you. So if you look at, maybe I look at Jim Fetter's data, and maybe he has found some people there that I don't have, but yet they're solid for him. They should be solid for me. I have a second cousin, Debbie, who let me look at her material because we're both descended from Harmon Tracy. And so her data is going to help with certain families. It'll help with the Tracys, with the Ellifritzes. Of course, it won't help with the Baker people, but it'll help with certain others. So I look at Debbie's through line data for Elijah. She also descends from Elijah, but now I'm going to look and see if she has some matches that are different than mine, and the answer is yes. For some reason, she does, and those people are really matches for me too, very probably. It's just that now I'm digging them out a little bit of a different way. So now here was Lizzie Bruce, and so this time I'm looking at another person, Amy, who let me look at her Bruce data. And so now I'm finding all kinds of interesting information that I could not find on my own, but I can find it because I can look at Amy's data. She has a lot more Bruce family matches, and some of those are likely related to me, but they didn't show up as matches for me. Now, by now, you know that there are a lot of variations, but there are also patterns in the matches. And so when we compare matches from different cousins, we get a little bit different messages in the way of the variations. And we also solidify some of our patterns. So the pattern is there. If I look at Jim Fetter's data or Debbie's data and my data, we have an awful lot of similarities, but then we have a little variation, and that variation is helpful as well because I'm going to find some more people that way. Now, this is a comparison of the kind of scores I get for certain matches compared with what Jim Fetter gets and Debbie gets. And you see sometimes there's a fair amount of real variation. So we're getting oftentimes really good help from some collaborators. Amy helped me with the Bruce people. Jim Fetter and Debbie helped me with a couple of groups because their data is enough different from mine, but there's a lot of similarity, but the variation also helps. Now, one thing that this will do is it may increase our number of matches. We need to broaden our thinking about many of our lower scoring people. If we take a hard look at a match who scores only 8 or 9, that match might really be solid if he's got a bunch of shared matches, because all those, he's going to hit over 20 with all of those. And remember, and it's marked in bold, even if I did not match a potential match, it doesn't mean he's not a solid relative. This is like Sean was, or like PME Oliver. These are cousins who are real matches, but they didn't match me according to the DNA test. And it is this good analysis that might open the door for us to find more people. So I've marked that as a really important slide. A year ago, Ancestry decided that they were going to give us fewer matches. And so the cutoff used to be 6, now it's 8. And so a lot of those good people who scored 7.2 and so on were really and truly good matches at the 4th or 5th or 6th cousin level. And it's with the sixth, seventh, eighth cousin. Those are the kind of people that you benefit from those that kind of score. But when they cut it off, or when they moved the threshold down from 8 to 6, I lost half of my matches, and so did my different collaborators. And that number might have even been higher, but I saved because I knew it was going to happen. Now, we think about clusters of matches when we're dealing with a particular branch of the family. And this is what I do. I hope that you're doing a similar thing where you color code your scorers. You start with the top scorers, the easy ones, the ones who have posted trees, the ones who have a lot of known shared matches. And you can see for different branches of the family, I have identified a lot of different ones. Like for the Nicholas Baker group, that's my dad's side of the house. Here I've defined a cluster of 107 people. And so they're now mostly second cousins because Nicholas came to America in the 1850s. And so his people now are 3, 4, 5, 6 generations back. And the scores that I get with them, depending on if they're 3 or 4 times removed second cousins, some of them are going to score below 8. Some of them will not make the cutoff. And so, a fair number score higher than 20, but a lot of them. Here's my question, a bunch of questions. Am I matching all of these Nicholas Baker people? No, I'm not matching them. Does everybody match? No, they don't match everybody else. But with the cluster, I know that it's a cluster. And if you match, 20 people of the cluster, you're part of that cluster. And so that's how the clusters become so valuable for us, because they establish the definite patterns. Now, certainly I'm misconnecting with a few of the matches. Some of them will score lower than they are expected to score. But even the third bullet, even the lowest scorers had several shared matches, and it's the shared matches that are really going to help. We have come to the end, almost to the end. Let's see what the top things are. Here's the message. If you do not match, that guy might still be a bona fide cousin. You need to check further. Maybe your non-match cousin matches you on another site, or maybe he matches another cousin. Different siblings or different first cousins might have very different scores or matches with different people, and you might need to take a look at different ones to be able to tell. This is really important. Number 4, you or your cousins might have solid matches with people who are 5th, 6th, or 7th cousins, because a good share of people, 10, 15%, maybe will score much higher than we would ever expect. Different DNA companies give different scores. Usually they're not very different, but once in a while they are. And remember your assignments. Get on those different DNA sites, post your data, get in the collaboration world, and then remember that story of the old DNA circles and how we will use similar data from either through lines or collaborators to do the same kind of thing. There will be a lot of useful low scoring matches, and maybe some who didn't even score high enough, but they still belong to you. So here we are. We have come to the end. I'm going to push the screen sharing button, stop share, and we'll sit here and we'll talk. Anna, are you still with us? Are you mesmerized?
Yes, I am. We have some questions about if there's a handout for this presentation.
No, say the specific question.
Is there a handout for this presentation?
Oh, I can send you a handout. Yeah.
Okay, and then I'll include that with the when we upload it to our invitation or on our website and on our YouTube channel and all the other places that we upload it. We have another question. Let's see. My focus is fifth cousin and more. How else will I break my brick wall? And I've found lots. They didn't know any more than I did.
Well, what can I say? That happens. And in fact, I think oftentimes we say, oh, if I can just get information from that person, and then they write back and, you know, they send you the nice email and you say, oh boy, I've got it. I'm going to learn more. And then they say, sorry, I don't know anything. You know, I don't even know who my great grandfather was. But on the other hand, sometimes some people will chip in with a fair amount of really good information. I want to show this this picture to the people who said that they really liked it. That's where you go to one of those dress up places, see? And that's some years ago. There I am with my good wife and a couple of children.
We have another question from Jenny asking, do you have any magic words to get someone to upload their DNA to other sites like GEDmatch or MyHeritage?
You know, this raises a really, that's really a good question, because if I had the magic elixir for that, I could really make good contributions to the community, because, you know, I've tried anything and everything. The best thing that I usually do is just to try and tell people a little bit about our common people and how I'm so interested in the family history aspect, and you know, isn't it nice? And I come from Lincoln, Illinois, and so do you. And you know, I try to make it interesting and try to get them to say things. And all I can say is once in a while they do. And once in a while they come through, but they don't come through as often as we would like. And as far as getting other people to collaborate, all I can say is put that invitation out there to them and assure them that you know, that their data does not get messed up. You know, you're just trying to get a little bit more insights into our common ancestors and such.
Awesome, thank you, James. I think, Barry, that answers your question as well. He asked, how have you been able to get so many collaborators? I have trouble getting people to respond to an opening email.
Who can say?
Well, thank you so much, James, for that wonderful presentation today. And thank you, everybody else, for joining us. We hope you'll join us for our next webinar, which will be on September 15th, Exploring the Basics of MyHeritage with James Tanner. A recording of this webinar will be made available next week. You can view that on our YouTube channel or on our website. If you have any comments or questions, you can always email us at fhl_webinars@byu.edu or follow Facebook and Twitter. Thank you and have a wonderful week.